One of the questions when I visit some of the PMI countries that I keep hearing is, what are we going to do when the next storm hits? That question is so critical as we think about the unpredictability of weather patterns, but more specifically around climate shocks. Let's take Mozambique for a quick example. In 2019, Mozambique experienced one of the worst cyclones in its history, Cyclone Idai. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced and it devastated communities. And when it devastates communities, our traditional tools, bed nets, indoor residual spraying, they're rendered ineffective. If you don't have a home, how can we hang a bed net, right? If you don't have walls, how are we going to keep you safe with indoor residual spraying? Malaria control and prevention becomes much more difficult. Then in 2023, we saw one of the most devastating storms again to hit Mozambique that we've ever seen, Cyclone Freddy. It hit Mozambique not once, but twice. 200,000 plus people were displaced. You had floods. You had, just incredible devastation. And so when we see these climate shocks, what we ask ourselves is two main questions. One is, how do we try to predict these things? How can we pre-position supplies? But in fact, how can we also warn communities, help create these more climate resilient communities such that we can mitigate the effects of these climate shocks? But then secondly, how are we programmatically going to adapt to the increasing frequency that we're seeing of these climate shocks in particular geographies? Again, working alongside our national malaria control programs and within our communities that we try to serve. One of the things that we're seeing in terms of climate change as it pertains to PMI countries is a real shift in the seasonality and the predictability of the seasonality of malaria. Let's take Senegal for an example. Senegal has had traditionally 3 months of rainy season every single year when we built our programming around that predictability. What we're seeing now is both a shift in the onset of the rainy season as well as longer rainy seasons. And the consequences of that is not only are we less able to know when to start the preventative care that we give typically to kids under 10, but also how long to do that for. And so climate change is really presenting complicated questions for us. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with our partners in the National Malaria Control Program to not only create more climate resilient programming, but also working directly with communities to create and foster climate resilient communities. The effects that we're seeing of climate change are undeniable. And frankly, we can't look away. Why can't we look away? Because it's affecting all of us. But here's one of the most important things to remember. It doesn't affect all of us equally. Those who are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change are typically the least resilient in terms of their communities to be able to withstand those shocks. And in terms of malaria, the most at-risk communities for malaria. Increased transmission, more illness, more death. And so when I think about hope and when I think about what gives me hope, I think about the fact that we're doing things today in 2023 that we've never done in the history of humankind. And yet, are we going to allow people to die unnecessary deaths because we can't create the alignment to come together around climate change to figure out what are the solutions? The solutions are ongoing. The solutions are in process, but we have to come together. We have the tools. New tools are always welcome, but we have great tools now. We have the ability, we have the incredible people, and most importantly, we have those leaders in the communities that we're trying to serve. What we lack is action. And we really need, it's imperative, my call to all of us is for us to turn that rhetoric into true action that can save lives. And that's what we're here for. That's what we're doing day in and day out, is to try to prevent unnecessary deaths and save lives.